When you drive down the Tamiami Trail through the park, you might see a sign pointing to an airport. Over 50 years ago, the Miami-Dade Port Authority announced a plan to build an airport in the heart of the Everglades. And although their plan was never complete, a 2-mile-long runway was, along with a control center nearby ready to welcome cargo and passengers, leaving 40 square miles of land in the Everglades destroyed forever. Anna Coon dug into the history of the airport and is at the Dade Collier Airport with more. Anna, what did you find out?
Behind this gate is what was supposed to be the biggest airport in the world. It was envisioned back in the late 1960s as a massive global hub with multiple runways that would welcome supersonic passenger planes from all over the world, right here in the middle of the Everglades. But that never happened. And today it's known as the greatest airport that never was. Holed up in the swamps of the Everglades lies a ghost of a dream that never came to be. Construction for the Dade Collier Airport started in 1968, and it was Florida's plan to take off into the future.
7 hold short of runway 31 right, you're behind it.
Somebody even back then realized what was going to happen today, which was we were going to have millions of people move into the area.
And with a big population came a need for big air travel and cargo centers. And Miami-Dade Port Authority thought the perfect place for it was in the swamps just outside Everglades National Park.
It would mean the Dade County would be the first in solving the big problems that we have today in urban and mass transportation.
And at the same time, the Boeing company was building a supersonic passenger plane, the Boeing 2707. With the takeoff blast so loud, it was said that it could shatter windows within a 5-mile radius of the plane.
Anything you're going to build, you're going to have to build far away.
And in 1969, the spot was decided, and all the way from the White House, President Richard Nixon pressed his big red button to send the first blast of dynamite, beginning airport construction 6 miles north of Everglades National Park.
And with that explosion began the reawakening of a movement that kind of had gone dormant, the birth of the new environmental movement in South Florida.
Just 2 years later, in 1971, the Boeing 2707 project was killed, and the plane never made a commercial flight. But the 2707's fail to lift off wasn't the real reason for the airport's failure.
If you build this jetport, it's going to kill this national treasure.
Conservationists realized a massive airport would lead to a lot more. The Department of Transportation was dreaming up plans for massive highways across the state and metro rails coming in from Tampa and Miami to bring passengers, which is where Everglades activist Marjorie Stoneman Douglas came into action.
The jetport is the beginning of the next 50 years of her life, and fighting these fights and creating the Friends of the Everglades.
Friends of the Everglades is now a massive conservation group that works on all sorts of restoration projects. But back in the 60s, its first and only goal was to take on the Port Authority and shut down the Everglades jetport.
They were openly hostile to people like Ms. Douglas and Art and me.
You're not ready to say at this time that the commercial airport in the Everglades will not be built?
I am not, no sir, you better believe it.
But eventually, he came around. And it was in major part to a man named Nathaniel Reed. Reed was the Assistant Secretary of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks at the Department of Interior, and his team created this, the environmental impact of the Big Cypress Swamp jetport.
Richard Nixon, the president, he didn't give a damn about the environment. But Nat Reed, he was able to change their minds.
Once the federal government pulled their support from the project, the Miami Port Authority stopped construction. But left behind was a massive runway in the middle of the swamp, and a reminder that this land was in danger.
The jetport is actually what crystallized the movement that resulted in the creation of Big Cypress National Preserve.
The Cypress National Preserve is 729,000 acres of land that surround the airport on all sides, and it holds the major watersheds that provide water to the entire national park. The death of the jetport brought on competing mindsets. Environmentalists wanted to make the land an extension of Everglades National Park. But the people that lived there, like hunters, fishers, and native tribes, protested. They were living on Big Cypress because they had gotten kicked off the land in Everglades National Park in 1947. And they wanted to protect the land, but also keep their homes and businesses. So the groups came up with a big compromise.
It wasn't going to be a park. It was a new breed of cat. It was going to be called a preserve.
Naming the land a preserve meant residents already living there could keep their homes, and Miccosukee and Seminole tribes could continue to use the land as they always did. Plus, sportsmen could still make a living off the woods and water by leading fishing or eco-tours. But the land was protected from any commercial development. Today, the jetport still stands, but it doesn't look like much. It's just this one building, essentially an office with a couple radios, a small staff, and a window that overlooks the runway. No fueling, maintenance, or FAA control tower.
It's just purely touch and goes, approach.
The airport works mostly as a training facility for new pilots and only sees a few planes a day.
It's funny that it sits there quiet, but boy did it make a big boom and jumpstart a lot of things.
And now, conservationists say its biggest use is as a symbol, a slab of pavement that serves as a reminder that this land is meant to be protected. Anna Coon, UMTV.